This week I had somebody send me a encouragement card, and it had a quote in it. It was actually the last 5 verses of Isaiah chapter 40. And it was kind of funny because I got to looking around my house and I had at least 4 things on the wall that were quoting Isaiah chapter 40. And I thought, it's really funny. I've never taught this chapter or anything like it. And I'll just give you a little bit of history on Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet. That meant whenever he walked into a room, he spoke the words of God. And you listened to what he said because it was as if God was talking. Isaiah was a guy who didn't feel worthy to be a prophet, but God set him apart for that. And so that's what he did. And he wrote a book called Isaiah, and it's written about 400 years before Jesus came. They call it the silent 400 years. For 400 years, after Isaiah, there was not another prophet. He was the last one. And in 400 years, there's no sound from God. And then John the Baptist shows up, and then Jesus shows up. Now, what's crazy is Isaiah is 66 chapters. How many of you know how many books are in the Bible? 66. That's ironic and unique all at the same time. Isaiah is known as the little Bible within the Bible. If you read the book of Isaiah, every chapter deals with something from creation to Revelation. And chapter 40 is the most quoted chapter in the entire Bible. Jesus quotes it. John the Baptist quotes it. And the reason they quote it is because it is where Jesus shows up in chapter 40 of Isaiah, which is 400 years before, 400 years after Isaiah writes this. So that's just kind of some facts about it. But I noticed the last couple of weeks I've talked about suffering a lot, partly because I'm kind of in that, and I teach from where I'm at, or I teach from where I'm going, or I teach from where I've been, right? And I had a lot of comments last week on last week's message because evidently a lot of people are suffering. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to do Isaiah chapter 40 this week is because it's actually a comforting book. It's actually a comforting chapter in the Bible, and it talks about what it is to trust God and to trust God's Word. And I thought, you know what? This is a great chapter for us to look over this week. So that's what we're going to do. And I'll just kind of break it down as we go. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Tell her that her sad days are gone, and her sins are pardoned. Yes, the Lord has punished her twice over for all of her sins. I want you to kind of see that. One of the times that's happening that she's getting punished for her sins is right now while this book is being written. What you don't see is Nebuchadnezzar is about to storm the gates of Jerusalem here in about 15 years from the time that this is penned. And he's going to carry off the captors, and he's going to take them to Babylon. All right? What's interesting is he's saying, comfort to my people. See, we have no idea, but sometimes the best way to comfort us is to get us out of our comfort zone. Right? And so Nebuchadnezzar comes in, and 15 years after this is written, and takes about 90% of the people and takes them back to Babylon. And you go, well, how in the world does God comfort during something like that? Some of the greatest miracles in the Bible are written in Daniel. Some of the greatest prophecies in the Bible are written in Daniel. Some of the things that foretell our whole future are written in Daniel. Do you know where Daniel was written? In Babylon, about 20 years after this happens. So you go, comfort. So they were actually comforted. Yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into the fiery furnace, but didn't burn up. Right? Daniel never bowed to a king, yet he was second in command of all of Babylon. How does that happen? Because the God of comfort, the God who teaches us who we are really, is in total charge. All right. Listen, it's the voice of someone shouting, "Clear the way through the wilderness for the Lord. Make a straight highway through the wasteland for our God. Fill in the valleys and level the mountains and hills. Straighten the curves and smooth out the rough places. Then the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together. The Lord has spoken." This is what John the Baptist quotes about himself. The Pharisees ask him, "Are you Elijah? Are you another prophet that we should expect?" And he says, "I am the one crying out in the wilderness, make a straight way." And then Jesus, about a year later, turns around and quotes the same thing and says, that was John the Baptist. See, God is fixing to do something in chapter 40. Chapter 40 brings into light that God Almighty is fixing to come to earth, and His name is Jesus. One of the things I love about the fill in the valleys and level the mountains and hills, Jesus is trying to make the playing field completely level. See, if you're going to see the cross, you can't see it from a valley. If you're going to see the cross, you can't see it from a hill. You need the ground flattened. You need everything. Now, because God is the creator of the universe, He can do anything He wants. And so when He uses this terminology, He's trying to get us to see that He's making the playing field before the cross level. Have you ever noticed that nobody can boast that they're better than anybody else when it comes to dealing with the cross? You ever thought about that? Gary, am I better than you when I'm kneeling at the cross asking Jesus to forgive me of my sins? Are you better than me? Do you see what I'm saying? The ground is level there. Nobody is better than anybody else. We're all groveling at the feet of Jesus saying, please forgive me for my sins. See? All right. And then he says, a voice said, shout. I asked, what should I shout? Shout that the people are like grass. Their beauty fades as quickly as the flowers in a field. The grass withers and the flowers fade beneath the breath of the Lord. And so it is with people. The grass withers and the flowers fade, but the word of God stands forever. We've got to realize that the word of God is all that matters. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? Do you know about 40 years ago, I thought I was something else than a bag of chips. I could lift my dad over my head. I could run as fast as you wanted to run. I was strong. I was courageous, fearless. What happened to me? I'm getting old. Now stuff that I used to brag about is starting to disappear. Muscles are starting to go away. Hair's starting to fall out. Stuff that used to be up here is now down here. The grass withers and the flowers fade. We cannot count on who we are to carry us through. And one of the saddest things I ever saw in my life, how many of you remember Burt Reynolds? Right? In our day, most of our day growing up, he was the iconic man's man. He could get any lady. He could drive any car. He was that guy. I'll never forget that day I watched a episode of Gas Monkey Garage. And what's his name is trying to get a signature on a Firebird from Burt Reynolds. He literally pulls up to his house in Florida. They drive the car right up to the gate, and they see Burt inside there. And in my mind, I'm going, Burt Reynolds, this is going to be cool. He's going to come out and sign the car. He didn't sign the car. Not only that, he was walking with a cane. And he was bent over. And 7 facelifts later, you didn't even recognize him. He didn't look like the old Burt Reynolds I knew. The grass withers and the flowers fade. We cannot rely on our own strength. O Zion, messenger of good news, shout from the mountaintops. Shout it louder, O Jerusalem. Shout and do not be afraid. Tell the towns of Judah, your God is coming. What did I say? 400 years later, Jesus shows up. Everybody asked him, who are you? Where'd you come from? Well, at 12, I was teaching the Pharisees what the Bible was all about. Oh, yeah. And then my first wedding I got invited to, I turned the water into wine. Right? Oh, yeah. One day, a bunch of people were following us out in the field, and I said, bring me the fish and loaves that the little boy has, and I fed 5,000 people. Right? And then I taught them the Beatitudes, what it is to be in the attitude of Jesus. And I taught things like the meek will inherit the earth. Yes, the sovereign Lord is coming in power. He will rule with a powerful arm. See, he brings his reward with him as he comes. He will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will carry the lambs in his arms. When he fed those 5,000 and about a month later he fed 4,000, what did he do? He fed his flock like a shepherd. And he did it just like he did in the time of the Egyptian Exodus, right? With manna from heaven. He took what God gave him and then multiplied it, and there it was. You know, Michelle and I was talking about eating at Chick-fil-A yesterday, and was like, yeah, I'm looking forward. I want to eat at Chick-fil-A today. And I went, oh no, they're closed today. Well, it's like manna. I better go get another one and put it in the refrigerator for tomorrow. You ever think about that? It's like manna. We hold it that highly. Man, I want Chick-fil-A on Sunday. Well, the only way you're going to do that is you buy it on Saturday. But here's the cool part. He will carry the lambs in his arms, holding them close to his heart. One of the things I love about that is when Jesus comes into your heart, you feel like you are fresh, brand new, made over, like a little lamb all over again. Yeah. And you feel that comfort, and you know that God is right there holding you. Yeah. He will gently lead the mother sheep with their young. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever seen a cattle drive? Or have you ever seen people load cows into a truck? Do you swat the mama on the tail if she's got a suckling on her? No. She will turn and run you smooth over. What do? You gently caress her into the trailer. But you usually have the baby leading her in there. That's the only way she's going to go. Who else? And then he switches a little bit here. And this is where I get really cool. I love... This is the part of God that I love. 2 of our songs this morning dealt with stars and creation, right? Who else has held the oceans in his hand? Have you ever tried to hold an ocean? Last time I was at the ocean, I tried to hold it. You can't even hold the sand. The creator of the universe can hold an ocean. Why? Because he formed it with his breath. I mean, think about that. Who has measured off the heavens with his fingers? I'm a carpenter by trade. I measure everything with a tape measure. I calculate in my head like a tape measure. I add, subtract, multiply, and divide like a tape measure in my head. You get a piece of paper and me with algebra, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start. You put a tape measure in my hand. Oh, that's 4 of those and 6 of those and 5 of those and that's 5. Do you know I measure everything like that? Do you know what the distance is right here between this knuckle and this knuckle? Good crowd. You know what the distance is from here to here? 18 inches. You know what the distance and breadth of my hand is? 8 inches. You know why I know these things? Because my wife, when she sees something at the craft show that she don't want to buy, she comes home and she says, Jim, would you go up there and look at that thing and build me one? And I go up there and I go, yeah, walk up. I go, okay, it's 24 inches. It's 8 inches. And it's an inch here. I never even used a tape measure. One guy caught me one day. I'm up there, I'm standing beside something. I go, okay. Stick my finger on it, put my hand on it. And he goes, I see what you're doing. Why don't you just buy that? I said, because I'm a carpenter. I don't buy carpentry. I build it. So who am I like? I'm like God in that. But here's the thing. I'm not like him in this. Who else knows the weight of the earth or has weighed the mountains and hills on a scale? You know my favorite mountain in the world? Some of you guys know this, but you know what my favorite mountain in the world is? Mount St Helens. Because it disproves all of evolution in 36 hours. All of evolution. There were things that happened in 36 hours with Mount St. Helens that scientists said take 1,000,000 years. 36 hours. Do you know there was a lake there? It filled it in, it displaced it, and it moved it. And then they said, I was standing at the base of Mount St. Helens one day at this lake, and it said, scientists said this lake wouldn't recover and fish would not be in it for 35 years. But they discovered 4 years later, it was stocked and teeming full of fish. Do they know all that? They don't know all that. Not only that, that water is more pure than it ever was before. It's clearer than it ever was before. It's colder than it ever was before at the base of a volcano. See, God does stuff that we can't do. And God does stuff that he wants us to marvel at, because if we will take the time to marvel at it, we will begin to follow him more deeply. Right? He has weighed the mountains and hills on a scale. In the first service I said, I think he put Mount St. Helens on a mountain, and he said, I'm going to take off 40% because the top blew off of it. And I think, it looks like to me, it weighs 758 billion pounds, give or take a skosh. Because God can do that. Who is able to advise the Spirit of the Lord? Who knows enough to give him advice or to teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? Have you ever noticed when you pray, God never asks you, what do you think? Jim, listen, I was thinking the other day, if you will go down and you will do this, and this church gets started, and you will do this, and you will do this, and you will do this, things will be good, and things will do something like you've never seen before. What do you think? I'm thinking he's crazy. But then he does it, so he's not crazy. He has used me to do more things in my life than I would have ever stinking imagined. And I didn't get an education to go do it. I didn't have this supreme ability to see into the future to do it. I didn't have this knack for being able to control the environment so that I could do it. He just said, follow me, and I said, yes, sir, and it happened. It happened.
Yes. Right.
Who knows enough to give him advice or teach him? Has the Lord ever needed anyone's advice? When should he break? You know what I love? I love watching the weather to see what the weather's going to do in the next 2 weeks. I do that all the time. But if you notice, when you're on the Weather Channel and you see that, every day the sun sets 1 minute earlier. Because we're in the downside of the year. If we were in the springtime of the year, every day would be a minute earlier. Right? He calculated that. He calculated that so that I, when I'm looking on the Weather Channel app, would notice that and say, oh my gosh, God knows time. Does he need instruction about what is good? Did someone teach him what is right or show him the path of justice? No, for all the nations of the world are but a drop in the bucket. All of these words have been really kind of educated sounded so far, and all of a sudden it gets down to the world stuff is just a drop in the bucket. All of a sudden it goes redneck on us right there. They are nothing more than dust on the scales. He picks up the whole earth as though it were a grain of sand. All the wood in Lebanon's forest and all the Lebanon's animals would not be enough to make a burnt offering worthy of our God. The nations of the world are worth nothing to him. Now that doesn't mean he doesn't care. It means that the power that they throw out there and show off is nothing. He can take a whole nation away like that. Amen. You ever heard of the lost city of Atlantis? Hello? Pompeii? Pompeii, in the morning they were drinking and sleeping and having fun and being all of this and that, and by that evening they were all frozen solid in a pyroclastic flow. See, they're nothing to him. They're here today, gone tomorrow. To whom can you compare God? What image can you find to resemble him? Can he be compared to an idol formed in a mold? Overlaid with gold and decorated with silver? Or if people are too poor for that, they might at least use wood that won't decay and a skilled craftsman to carve it in an image that won't fall down. See, our feeble attempt at creating a God is ridiculous. You know, I'm ever reminded of this whenever I used to work on hotels, because all the people that owned the hotels were Hindu. And you know what they would do every time we would get ready to pour the foundation? They would come out with a little shovel, and as the concrete truck is pulling up, they would dig a hole. They had chocolate. They had a little Shiva, right? The little gal with all the arms. They had a little Shiva, and then they put some spices in this baggie and threw it in there for good luck. You know what I always did? Do you not realize God is blessing you? Do you not realize that you have something because God said that? It's got nothing to do with that piece of rock. We're pouring a bunch of piece of rocks on top of that. Which of that is an idol? Haven't you heard? Don't you understand? Are you deaf to God's word? The words he gave before the world began, are you so ignorant? God sits above the circle of the earth. The people below him seem like grasshoppers to him. Oh, we get smaller than that. Watch this. He spreads out the heavens like a curtain and makes his tent from them. Have you ever thought that God camps? You ever thought about that? God goes on a camp out, and he just takes the curtains of the sky and goes, whoosh, I'm going to go to sleep. Or, whoosh, now the sun's up. Have you ever thought about that? That's the God we serve. He spreads out he judges the great people of the world and brings them all to nothing. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine this week, and he was talking about some rich guy, and I said, you know what, years ago, there was this rich guy I knew, And a friend of mine was in the elevator with him. He says, I literally rode in the elevator with the richest man in Ardmore. This was 20 years ago. And I go, so what? And he goes, no, but he's the richest man in Ardmore. I said, mark my words, there will be a day you'll never know he existed. And that guy laughed at me and said, ha, 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 ha. I could tell you his name. He used to own a big concrete company, and his name was splashed everywhere. You can't even find it now. His daughter inherited the whole company a year after he died, and she sold it to the highest bidder. And the people that he had bought off for years not to come here and sell concrete bought him out smooth cold. His name is no longer in this town anywhere except for one building out on 142 where they haven't painted over it yet because the building's fallen down. Richest man in Ardmore one day, now you can't even find his name on something. Let's not forget, our importance to God comes from our relationship with God, not from what we think we can do. God sits above the circle of the earth. Okay. He judges the people, great people of the world, and brings them all to nothing. They hardly get started, barely taking root when he blows on them and they wither. The wind carries them off like chaff. Wow. So do you aspise to be something great? Follow the Lord. He will make you great, and all of heaven will hear about it. Amen. To whom will you compare me? Who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Look up to the heavens. Who created all the stars? He brings them out like an army, one after another, calling each one by its name. Amen. I love looking at the stars because it reminds me every one of them has a name. And every one of them has a purpose. Every galaxy is created by God for purpose. Most of it's just to make astronomers do this. Because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. Not one is unaccounted for. O Jacob, how can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? O Israel, how can you say God ignores your rights? Have you ever heard? Have you never understood? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth. Everything we see, he created. And you go, no, he didn't make that car out there. Oh yeah, I'll try to make that car without the basic elements that it takes to make it. You know, I like that old joke. God goes, okay, man, let me see what you can do. And he grabs a handful of dirt. He goes, put that down. That's mine. Amen. Now make something without that. Make something by just speaking it into existence. He never grows weak or weary. This is what I want you to cue in on. No one can understand or can measure the depths of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. Amen. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Yeah. Amen. Guys, chapter 40 is the catalyst of Isaiah. It is the turning point. It is pronouncing the Lord's coming. And 400 years later, Jesus showed up and rocked the world. And if you think I'm lying, how come all date is measured by him? If he's insignificant, why is there BC and AD? Huh? Why do we measure all time by him? Because he created everything. Yes. And time is under his control. Yes. Although he is not ordered by time. He orders it. One of my favorite sayings is whenever perfect timing happens in your life, now get this, perfect timing, when it happens, that means something outside of time reached into your time, made it happen, and stepped out without screwing one thing up. So the next time you say, oh, that was perfect timing, go, oh, God, you're perfect timing. Because that's true. Guys, I love you. I want you to be encouraged by Isaiah chapter 40. I want every one of you to go home sometime this week and read it. It's a long chapter, but do you know what? If you read it straight through, it takes 5 minutes. How many of you can read? How many of you can't read? Okay, then look it up on YouTube and push play and it'll read it to you. Okay? We're without excuse. We're without excuse in this age of technology. Thank you, guys. Read Isaiah 40 this week.